Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to reading class. We were on the one and only Ivan, and we know that Stella just passed away, and Ruby is going to start to get trained by Mac. All right, so let's go over some vocabulary words. So it says match the vocabulary words to their synonyms. Synonyms mean the same, about the same. So we have bedraggled, sullen, daintily, precisely, anxious, and glints. So our words to choose from are neatly, eager, shines, gloomy, exactly, and untidy. So if we go to bedraggled, bedraggled would be untidy. Synonyms are about the same, not antonyms, which means the opposite. So we are doing bedraggled and untidy. Sullen is gloomy. Daintily is, let me go past daintily. That one stumps me every time. Precisely is exactly. Anxious is eager. And glints is shines. Daintily, I always think as something that's very small and tiny. But daintily in this instance is neatly. All right, so our questions that we're going to look at. What is the present that Julia gives to Ivan that he tries to eat? That's important because there's a gift that Julia gives that Ivan does not try to eat. When Mac tries to hit Ruby with the claw stick, what does she do? What does Mac's treatment of Ruby in A New Beginning tell us about his character, and why might he be treating Ruby this way? And then how did Ivan feel about his domain at the mall when he first moved in, and how has his feelings changed over time? All right, so let's get to our reading. I'll get off your screen. And it says, hopefully you can see that better. All right, so A New Beginning. We don't see Mac for 2 days, and when he returns, he doesn't talk about Stella. Mac says he's anxious to teach Ruby some tricks. He says the billboard is bringing in more visitors. He says it's time for a new beginning. All afternoon and into the evening, Mac works with Ruby. Ruby's feet are looped with rope so that she cannot run. The heavy chain hangs off her neck. Mac shows her Stella's ball, her pedestal, her stool, and he introduces her to Snickers. When Ruby obeys Mac, he gives her a cube of sugar and a little bit of dried apple, and when she doesn't, he yells and kicks at the sawdust. When George and Julia arrive, Mac is still training Ruby. Julia sits on the benches and watches them. She draws a little, but mostly she keeps her eyes on Ruby. Bob watches too. He's hiding in the corner of my domain, under no tag. It's raining outside, and Bob does not like damp feet. Ruby trudges behind Mac, her head drooping. Endlessly they circle the ring. Sometimes Mac slaps her flank with his hand. Suddenly, Ruby jerks to a stop. Mac pulls the chain hard, but Ruby refuses to move. Come on, Ruby, Mac is almost pleading. What is your problem? She's exhausted, I say to myself. That's the problem. Mac groans. Idiot elephant. Idiot human, Bob mutters. Walk, Ruby, I say, although I know she's too far away to hear me. But do what he says. Walk, Mac commands, now. Ruby doesn't walk. She plops her rump in the sawdust floor. I think maybe she's tired, Julia says. Mac wipes his forehead with the back of his hand. Yeah, I know, we're all tired. He pushes Ruby with the heel of his boot. She ignores him. George looks over from the food court, where he's wiping off tables. Mac, he yells, maybe you should call it a day. I'll close up. Mac yanks on Ruby's chain as she's anchored like a tree. He pulls harder and falls to his knees. That does it, Mac says, and he brushes the sawdust off his jeans. I am through playing around. Mac stomps off to his office, and when he returns, he's carrying a long stick, the gleaming hook on its end is almost beautiful, like a sliver of moon. It's a claw stick. Mac pokes Ruby with the sharp point. Not hard, just a touch. I can tell he wants her to see how much it can hurt. I growl low in my throat. Ruby doesn't budge. She is a gray, unmoving boulder. She closes her eyes, and for a moment I wonder if she's fallen asleep. I'm warning you, Max says, and he breathes out. He's staring at the ceiling. Ruby makes a huffing sound. Fine, Max says. You want to play that way? He draws back the claw. No, Julia cries. I'm not going to hurt her, Max says. I just want to get her attention. Bob snarls. Max swings. The hook slices the air just a few inches above Ruby's head. See, you don't want to mess with me, Max says. He draws back the claw stick again. Now move! Ruby jerks her head, flinging her trunk towards Mac. She makes a noise that sends the sawdust scattering. It makes my glass shiver. It is the most beautiful mad I have ever heard. Ruby's trunk slaps into Mac. I don't see exactly where she strikes him. Somewhere below his stomach, I think. And I know he must be uncomfortable because Mac drops the claw stick and falls to the ground and curls into a ball and howls like a baby. Direct hit, Bob says. Poor Mac. Mac groans. He stumbles to his feet and hobbles off towards his office. Ruby watches him leave. I can't read her expression. Is she afraid? Relieved? Proud? When Mac has gone, George and Julia lead Ruby from her ring. It's okay, baby. It's okay, Julia says, stroking Ruby's neck. They settle Ruby in her domain and make sure she has fresh water and food. Before long, Ruby's dozing. Dad, Julia asks as George locks Ruby's iron door, do you think Mac would ever hurt Ruby? I don't think so, Jules, George says. At least I hope not. Maybe we could call someone. George scratches his chin. I wish I could help Ruby, but I wouldn't know how. I mean, who would I call? The elephant cops? Besides, George looks down. I need this job, Jules. We need this job. Your mom, doctor bills. He kisses the top of Julia's head. Back to work, you and me both. Julia sighs and reaches for her backpack. She removes a piece of paper, a bottle of water, and a small metal box. Homework first, George says, wagging a finger. Then you can paint. It's for art class, Julia explains. We're doing watercolors. I'm going to paint Ruby. George smiles. All right then. Just don't forget your spelling. Dad, Julia asks again. Did you see Mac's face when Ruby hit him? George nods. Yes, he says solemnly. I did, and he shakes his head. Poor Mac. He turns away, and only then do I hear him laughing. All right, let me go to our questions. Okay, so we're going to come across some more words here. So our vocabulary words are furrowed, incompetent, bleeding, temperamental, dismay, and monstrosity. So these words are going to come up in just a second. So not having good enough skills to do something, okay, that's incompetent. If you're incompetent, you don't have the skills to complete something correctly. Something that is large and ugly looking, that's a monstrosity, kind of like a monster, right there, monstra. So that's monstrosity, ugly and large. To have moods that change quickly and often, that's temperamental. Lasting for a very short time, that's fleeting, a fleeting moment, it's very short. Wrinkled because of frowning or concentrating. So furrowing is right between your eyebrows, that skin where it goes together, that would be your furrow. And then a feeling of shock or dismay, or distress, I'm sorry, that would be dismay. Dismay and distress. So let's look at our questions here. What is the name of Ivan's stuffed toy gorilla? So you probably already saw that. And going nowhere, what does Mac do to save money? In Bad Guys, Ivan imagines what it would be like to be a sheriff. Why does Ivan wish to be a sheriff? Describe what Ivan plans to do to save Ruby. And in 12, Julia asks her father, if I'm going to be an artist when I grow up, why do I need to know how to spell? And how would you answer Julia if she were to ask this question? And then that should take us to 7. All right, so that's going to give us some point of reference if we come across any of those answers in our story. All right, let's get back to our story. So it says colors. Julia opens the metal box. I see a row of little squares, green, blue, red, black, yellow, purple, orange. The colors seem to glow. She pulls out a brush with a thin fluff of a tail at its ends, and she dips the brush into water and wets the paper and then taps at the end at the red square. When the brush meets the damp paper, the pink petal of colors unfurl like morning flowers. I can't take my eyes off that magical brush. For a moment, I'm thinking about Ruby and Mac and the caustic and Stella. Almost. Julia touches the red again, then blue, and then suddenly is the purple of a ripe grape. She touches the blue and her paper turns to summer sky, black and white, and now I see what she's painting a picture of. It's a picture of Ruby. I can make out her floppy ears and her thick legs. Julia stops painting. She takes a few steps back, hands on her hips, gazing at her work. She scowls. It's not right, she says, and she glances over her shoulder at me. I try to look encouraging. Julia starts to crumple up the paper, then reconsiders. Instead, she slides it into the cage at the spot where my glass is broken. Here you go, she says. A Julia original. That'll be worth millions someday. Gingerly, I pick up the paper. I do not eat a single bite of it. Now remember, the other one asks what he does eat. This says he does not eat it. Oh, hey, I almost forgot. Julia runs to her backpack and she pulls out 3 plastic jars, one yellow, one blue, one red. She opens the jars and an odd, not food smell hits my nose. Julia pushes the jars one by one through the opening. Then she slides some paper through. These are called finger paint, she says. My aunt gave them to me, but really, I am too old for finger painting. I stick a finger into the jar. The paint is thick as mud. It's cool and smooth like bananas underfoot. I pop my finger into my mouth. Ugh, it's not exactly ripe mango, but it's not bad. Julia laughs. You don't eat it, you paint with it. She grabs a piece of paper and presses her fingers on it. See? Like this. I place my finger on the piece of paper. I lift it, and a red mark is there. I get a bigger glob from the pot and I slap my hand down on the page. When I pull my hand off the paper, its red twin stays behind. This isn't like the ghostly handprints on my glass, the ones that my visitors leave behind. This handprint can't be so easily wiped away. That probably makes him feel good that he sees his own hand. A bad dream. I lie awake, peeling dried red paint off my fingertips. Bob, who accidentally walked on one of my paintings, is licking his red paws. Every so often I glance over at the empty ring. The claw stick glints in the moonlight. Stop! No! Ruby's frantic cries startle me. Ruby, I call, you're having a bad dream. You're okay. You're safe. Where's Stella? She asks, gulping air. Before I can answer, she says, never mind. I remember now. Go back to sleep, Ruby, I say. You've had a hard day. I can't go back to sleep. She says, I'm afraid I'll have the same dream. There was a sharp stick and it hurt. So we know what she's dreaming about. I look at Bob and he looks back at me. Oh, Ruby. Oh, Ruby says. Oh, Mac. She puts her trunk between the bars. Do you think, she hesitates, do you think Mac is mad because I hurt him today? I consider lying, but gorillas are terrible liars. Probably, I finally say. He ran away after that, Ruby says. Bob gives a scornful laugh. Crawled away is more like it. We were quiet for a while. Branches claw at the roof. A light rain drums. One of the parrots murmurs something in her sleep. Ruby breaks the silence. Ivan, I smell something funny. He can't help it, Bob says. I believe she's referring to the finger paints Julia gave me, I say. What are finger paints? Ruby asks. You make pictures with them, I explain. Could you make a picture of me? Well, maybe someday. And then I remember Julia's picture, the one that was worth $1,000,000. I hold it up to the glass. Look, it's you. Julia made it. It's hard to see, Ruby said. There's not much moonlight. Why do I have two trunks? I examine the picture. Those are feet. Why do I have 2 feet? That's called artistic license, Bob says. Ruby sighs. Could you tell me another story? She asks. I don't think I can ever go back to sleep. I told you all I remember, I say with a helpless shrug. Tell me a new story, she says. Make something up. I try to think, but my thoughts keep returning to Mac and his claw stick. Anything yet? Ruby asks. I'm working on it. Ivan, Ruby presses. Bob says you're going to save me. I search for true words. I'm working on that too. Ivan, Ruby says in a voice so low I can barely hear her, I have another question. I can tell from the sound of her voice that this will be a question I don't want to answer. Ruby taps her trunk against the rusty iron bars of the door. Do you think, she asks, that I'll die in this domain someday, like Aunt Stella? Once again, I consider lying. But when I look at Ruby, the half-formed word dies in my throat. Not if I can help it, I say instead. I feel something tighten in my chest, something dark and hot. And it's not a domain, I add. I pause and then I say, it's a cage. The story. I look at the ring laid on the fresh sawdust. I look at the sky and the half-hidden moon. I just thought of a story, I say. Is it a made-up story or a true one? Ruby asks. True, I say. I hope. Ruby leans against the bars. Her eyes hold the pale moon in them. Away, a still pond holds stars. Once upon a time, I say, there was a baby elephant. She was smart and brave, and she needed to go to a place called a zoo. What's a zoo? Ruby asks. A zoo, Ruby, is a place where humans make amends. Amends means that you try to fix something that you've done that's wrong. A good zoo is a place where humans care for animals and keep them safe. Did the baby elephant get to the zoo? Ruby asks softly. I don't answer right away. Yes, I say at last. How did she get there? Ruby asks. She had a friend, I say, a friend who made a promise. So think to yourself, who's the friend that made the promise? And who did this friend make a promise to? So hopefully you're thinking back and thinking Ivan made the promise to Stella to take care of Ruby. How? It takes a long time, but finally Ruby returns to sleep. Ivan, Bob whispers, yawning. What you said about the zoo? How are you going to do it? Suddenly feel as if I can't sleep for 1,000 days. I don't know, I admit. You'll think of something, Bob says confidently, his voice trailing off as his eyes close. What if I don't? I asked, but Bob is already asleep. His little red feet dance, and I know he's running in his dream. Okay, so this is a sad part because this is the remembering. Now we have to remember these animals did not start at the big top. They came from somewhere else. Remembering. Bob and Ruby sleep on. I don't sleep. I think about the promise I made to Stella and the pictures I've made for Ruby. And I remember. I remember it all. What they did. You have to think about who he's talking about. Who's the they? We are clinging to our mother, my sister and I, when the humans killed her. They shot my father next. Then they chopped off their hands, their feet, their heads. Something to buy. There is a cluttered, musty store next to my cage. They sell an ashtray there. It is made from the hand of a gorilla. So just think about what we just read, what they did. They chopped off their hands, their feet, their heads, and right next to his cage, they sell an ashtray in a store, and it's made from a gorilla. So that's got to be really hard for him. All right, so it says, another Ivan. When morning comes and the parking lot glimmers with dew, I see a billboard on the highway. There I am, the one and only Ivan, bathed in a pink light of dawn. I look so angry with my furrowed brow and clenched fist. I look the way my father did the day the men came. I am, I suppose, a peaceful sort. Mostly I watch the world go by and think about naps and bananas and yogurt raisins, but inside me, hidden, is another Ivan. He could tear a grown man's limbs off his body. In the flicker of time it takes a snake's tongue to taste the air, I could taste revenge. You have to remember, why would he want revenge? What's happened to him? He is the Ivan on the billboard. I stare at the one and only Ivan, at the faded picture of Stella, and I remember George and Mac on their ladders, adding the picture of Ruby to bring new visitors to the Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade. I remember the story Ruby told, the one where the villagers came to rescue her. I hear Stella's kind, wise voice. Humans can surprise you sometimes. I look at my fingers coated in red paint, the color of blood, and I know how to keep my promise. And we'll end with days. Days. During the days, I wait. During the night, I paint. I worry when Mac takes Ruby into the ring. He carries the claw stick with him all the time now. He doesn't use it. He doesn't have to. Ruby isn't fighting back anymore. She does whatever Mac asks. All right, so we didn't get to the question 6, but we did get to our question 5. So let's go to question 5. So when Mac tries to hit Ruby with the claw stick, what does she do? She cries, she runs away from him, she sneezes, or she smacks him with her trunk. Hopefully you see that she smacks him with the trunk. And what does Mac's treatment of Ruby in A New Beginning tell us about his character, and why might he be mistreating Ruby this way? And we know that Mac is worried that the Big Top isn't making enough money to care for the animals and to keep their jobs going, and so he's very stressed. And so it tells us about his character. The treatment of Ruby is that he is getting stressed and that he's taking it out, his frustrations, on Ruby. But then you'll notice that at the end, when we read, I think he saw the error of his way, because yes, he carries the claw, but he doesn't use the claw. But we also see that Ruby is doing what he wants to. And how did Ivan feel about his domain at the mall when he first moved in? Well, his domain, he was excited about his domain. He had his picture of the jungle there, and that made him feel like good, and he didn't really think too deeply. But then Stella, her death, leads him to see what Stella was saying about Ruby and how Ruby needs to be saved so that she didn't spend her whole life in a cage. And so now, how has his feelings about his domain changed? He doesn't see it as a domain anymore. He sees it as a cage. He sees it as they're being kept and they don't have their freedom. All right, so we're going to pause right there, and I'll upload this. There'll be a couple of questions for you for your quiz, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. I miss you, and I hope you're enjoying the one and only Ivan. Take care.